Hello, my name is Kathleen Staten, and I work with an orchestra in town called Ars Lyrica Houston. Ars Lyrica focuses on performing music from the Baroque time period, or the 17 and 1800s. And we look at the history of how instruments were made, what people were writing about music, and we try to come up with the most authentic experience possible. What does that mean? Well, think about it. If you were a time traveler and you went back 300 or 400 years, would you see the same kinds of things you were seeing today? No. You would be wearing different clothes, listening to different music. Everything would feel different. But it's difficult to write all of that down in one place. So, with our study and our research, as well as our music practicing, we try to recreate the music as it would have been heard at that time. It's different when you hear a symphony orchestra play the same piece that you would hear us play. Why? Well, our instruments have slightly different voices and they are played in different ways. So imagine this. Imagine if you were going to try and look at a GIF that somebody sent to you or to your parents, and you were going to try and look at it on an old phone. Would that work? No. Or how about if you wanted to listen to the latest music that you downloaded onto your MP3 player, except that all you have is a compact disc? Those two things don't go together. So it's a little bit like that, what we do. We're historians and musicians. Today we're going to talk about the link between science, music, and emotion. One of the reasons it's so important for us to play on the instruments that they had available at the time was that they sounded differently. And part of that different sound is in the science of how the music makes us feel. So before we get too far down this path, let's talk a little bit about feelings and emotions. When I say emotions, what's the first thing that you think of? Maybe some of the basic ones like happy or sad or angry or tired. All of these are things that we feel. And emotions are universal, like music. Everybody feels them, and they tend to respond in our brain the same ways. So let's see how you feel when we exhibit different emotions. So would you say in a happy tone of voice your name just like this? Hello, my name is Kathleen Staten. Maybe try your name in an angry voice. Hello, my name is Kathleen Staten. How about sad? Hello, my name is Kathleen Staten. Now, aside from all of the facial expressions that you watched me have, then you might have noticed that the tone or the sound of my voice changed along with that emotion that I was trying to show you. It's a lot like that in music. So the emotion or the feeling that the composers were trying to create came from different compositional techniques, or how did they put it together? So when we're sharing emotion, we use our bodies, our faces, and the sound of our voice to get our listener to understand how we're feeling. In the 16 and 1700s, somebody wrote all of this down with kind of a guidebook for how to compose, and it was called the Doctrine of Affections. And what that means is that there were specific kinds of intervals or spaces between notes that were believed to make you feel something. There were certain keys, which is sort of like where your voice lays when you're speaking. Like if you say, "Hi, Mom," try that now. "Hi, Mom." Or, "Hi, Mom." You still said, "Hi, Mom," and it's still your voice, but where it lays in your voice, whether it's high or low, sweet or gravelly, is very much like the different keys of music. So they have their own feelings associated with them and with how they sound. One of the instruments that I play is the recorder. You may have seen one kind of like this. In fact, you may have even done some recorder karate if you're taking a recorder program at your school. This is a little bit bigger than the recorders that you would normally play. It's called an alto recorder. So if something is bigger, it usually has a lower sound. So let's hear a little bit of this alto recorder. So when we're talking about the intervals or the spaces between notes, we mean this. That's a very small space between two notes. Here's a large space. Can you think of any songs that have notes that are close together? Let's see if you recognize this. A very simple children's song, easy to sing and easy to learn. How about this one? Lots of jumps, lots of skips. That was our national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner. Very challenging to sing and also hard to play on the recorder. But we're not looking at those songs today. We're going to look at 12 pieces by a composer named Telemann. One of the things I love about Telemann is that he was a businessman. He was quite keen to make a whole lot of money writing as much music as he possibly could. So a composer that you might have heard of named Johann Sebastian Bach, he worked for the church, he wrote music for every Sunday, and his goal was service. Telemann's goal was make all the money. So he wrote lots of music for people to be able to play in their houses. While you've been at home lately, I bet you've taken advantage of the television or some games, definitely your iPad. I'm sure you've been online during your schoolwork, but of course they didn't have anything like that 300 or 400 years ago. So all entertainment was about making music together and doing things that were with people and playing games or singing or learning instruments. So Telemann wrote music that was easy to play and easy to have fun with. So we're going to look at these 12 marches today. Each one of them has a different emotion. Now, we won't hear all of them, but I would like you to try and consider with this first one, what emotion do you think that it conveys? Well, what did you think? Did you get up, walk around, dance? How did that one make you feel? The word for this one is actually majesty. It was meant to feel royal. So you might have heard in it, let me put my glasses back on. You might have heard in it things that sounded like a march, like someone processing. Can you imagine walking down a big long hall to this music? You certainly wouldn't be falling asleep or feeling sad. So something that makes that music feel that way to you is the rhythm, that dotted back and forth. And something else are the quarter notes, the spaces, so that you feel like you know exactly where your feet go. In fact, if you're not standing up now, why don't you try? See if you can march along in step with each step on a beat. So the beat for this piece is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why don't you clap it with me now? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now get on your best royal feeling. You'll probably need to hold your chin up very high and stand up very straight and pretend that you're wearing a big heavy crown and you're going to walk around. Are you ready? Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. Let's try on another emotion. That was called la douceur, or sweetness. Did it make you want to get up and dance or march around? Me either. Now, there's a very specific reason for that. So, the speed was a little bit slower. Secondly, the notes were all very close together and they moved slowly away from each other, so no jumping around. You heard what we call a lot of scale or stepward movement, like this. And also coming down. And it had a very soft swaying rhythm to it, almost like a lullaby. Listen again to the beginning. Now, if you're really on top of it, you might also hear that it had a very different sound to it. So our first movement was in the key of D major, and D major sounded like this. Very bright and very cheerful. This was in a different key. This had a different sound to it. So it sits in a different place in the recorder's voice, sort of like if you said, "Hi, Mom," or you said, "Hi, Mom." It's the same thing, but it has a different sound to it. It also has different fingerings, and the Baroque composers knew a lot about that. So, for example, if you have to finger something that has lots of fingers picked up in between, like a fork, then that note isn't going to come out clearly. Listen. Versus this note. It just has a foggier versus a brighter sound. And the composers knew that, and they used that to help you feel emotion. I have one more for you, and I think it might be your favorite. So let's take a listen to this, and I bet you can tell just by my face what kind of emotion this might be. was called joy or rejoicing. Why do you think that that was joyful while the second piece was not? Well, a lot of that had to do with all the jumps and the skips. Listen again to the beginning. Even the music skips along and wants you to skip along with it. Also, this is back in one of those happy keys, a key that means where it lays on the recorder in its voice. That means where the voice of the recorder sounds, it makes you feel a certain kind of emotion. So again, these ideas that scientists had 400 years ago about how music could make you feel has been proven true by science today. So it turns out that it's not just classical music that can make you feel these things. Any music can make you have an emotional response. Now, so the science of how music can make you feel is interesting, but how does it apply to you? Have you ever considered how much music there is in your life every day? Where are the places that you hear music? And does it make you feel different ways? For example, how would you feel if you heard this? Maybe you recognize that as the theme from Star Wars. And if you were listening, you might notice also that there were some big jumps in that, very joyful jumps in a very happy key. So I think that John Williams might have understood the doctrine of affections as well. So think about how the music that you hear around you in the movies and the television shows that you like changes how you're feeling. For example, how do you know if a bad guy is coming? Is the music fast, slow, sad, happy? Think for a second about something, some piece that would be sneaky. How would a sneaky somebody sound? Why do you think that that sounded sneaky? When you're taking steps to hide or to surprise someone or maybe not be found, how do you walk? Do you take giant, loud steps? No, you take tiny, small, silent steps. And so that's why the music in the Pink Panther theme has very small intervals or notes that are very close together. It's meant to make you feel a certain way. Do you know how many keys there are? There's one key for every note in the scale, and the number of notes in the scale is 11. 8 in the regular scale, well, 7 without repeating, and that's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then do, of course, repeats again. So adding in the extra keys with the flats gets us to 11. Each one of these keys was said to have its own emotional content. And when you played a piece that was written in that key or key signature, then your listener was supposed to feel that specific emotion. Now, this is just an emoji map for you to be able to see a little bit clearer about how these keys made us feel. We had 3 different keys today. We listened to G major, D major, and also F major. Have you ever looked at a picture of a brain scan? Scientists can actually see what's happening inside our brains. If you look at this picture, you can see that there are 4 different ways that our brain can respond. Well, at least 4, but 4 main buckets. And in those 4, you can see in the center the emotions that we might be most familiar with. In the red, you see joy. In the green, peacefulness. Blue is sad, and yellow is tension or frustration. So what's interesting here is that the pictures that they take of emotion in the brain are exactly the same as when they hear music that goes with those emotions. One of the amazing things about emotion is that, like I said earlier, it's universal. That means that we all feel the same emotions. When we better understand how we feel, then we can understand the people around us. And when we can relate directly to how people are feeling and understand them, that's called empathy. There are so many emotions, it could seem overwhelming. But if we think about them like we did in the brain scan, in those 4 buckets that you see here, it makes it a lot easier to put these almost 50 emotions into an easier understanding. In 2008, it was the first time that scientists began studying how emotion and music related to each other in those brain scans that we saw earlier. I'm always fascinated by the number of words that we can think about to describe how we're feeling. At the beginning, we talked about sad, happy, angry, tired, just a few, and we all know those. But the more descriptive that you can get about how you feel, the better you'll be able to explain yourself and also to find the music to suit your mood. One of my favorite singers is Cecilia Bartoli. I love listening to her and watching her because her facial expressions go so clearly with the music. We've talked a couple of times about universal languages of music and emotions, so let's test this out. Let's watch an excerpt from Vivaldi's Farnace. How do you think this music was meant to make you feel? You can tell from her face that she feels quite sad or full of anguish. But how do you know that? And it's in Italian, so we don't know exactly what she's singing about. But the music that Vivaldi wrote to show the tension and the sadness was stepwise, small steps, small intervals between each one of the notes. And it was in a minor key, not a major key, which also helps us to understand that we're not meant to feel joyful in this. Another key is the tempo or the speed, so this was quite slow. The key that Vivaldi chose for this was one of complex emotion, not simply sadness, but truly deep feeling of loss. This aria, or song, is being sung by a mother who has lost her children in war. It's a very sad plot right now, but it ends happily in the end because it turns out they're not lost. At this moment, the mother thinks that they are gone, and so you can imagine how sad she must be feeling. Let's look at one more, my favorite singer, Cecilia Bartoli, singing a piece called Rataplan. I assure you, this is exactly the opposite. So if we're thinking about opposite emotions, how do you think this one will sound?
Au plein di pyramides, chez les tambours battants, rampataplan, les Français préparent à la victoire en chantant, mais on sort toujours docile, mais voilà dans les foyers, devenus tambours des mille, de tambours de grenadiers, de tambours de grenadiers, de grenadiers, rataplan, tambour, rataplan, pataplan, pataplan, rataplan, matin et soir, rataplan, paparladis, rataplan, je l'ai toujours tambour battant, je l'ai toujours tambour battant, tambour battant, tambour battant.
Did you enjoy that? Can you believe how different that was? Such joy that she's expressing there. That was D major, our favorite joyful, triumphant key coming back from battle. The way she used her words, it actually sounded like a drum and a trumpet, a bit like the rejoicing that we did at the end of our last piece. So your homework is put on some music that you like and try and figure out how does it make you feel. And in fact, make a video and send it to us because I'd love to see what emotions you connect with music, and I can tell you why. Thank you so much for visiting with us today with Ars Lyrica Houston and with me about how emotion and music are connected.